Well, hello there, Choralosophy audience. I'm Chris Muntz, host of the Choralosophy podcast, and if you are listening to this portion of this short little episode, you are on the main podcast feed. And today, I am just going to drop a little bit of this rumination, a little bit of this reflection in the main podcast feed, and then I'm going to finish it over on the private podcast feed, which can be accessed at patreon.com. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is the optional. Of course, everything on the main feed is always going to be free, but there is an optional feed with extra content, lessons that I've created, behind the scenes discussions on the show at Patreon. You can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. It just debits out of your account every month without even having to think about it, as a way to support the costs, the underlying costs of the show. And so what I'm going to do today is start out a little bit of a reflection I've been thinking about quite a bit. In fact, it has a lot to do with some of the topics that I've been tackling recently on the show. Many of you just heard or saw that the episode most recently was with Dr. Ferdinand of Oakwood University, the Aeolians. And we talked a little bit about some philosophies and some concepts behind a lot of the conversations that we have around social justice in the choral world. And interestingly, this is going to be a fun way to, I think, a kind of a funny way to discuss this. But recently, I'm going to speak cryptically now. There was a well-known composer that kind of went and got himself canceled. And in the response to that, we saw a lot of outcry on social media. We also saw a lot of response from this composer. And I went on the Choralosopher's Facebook page, and I kind of floated the idea to the listeners there, or to the folks there, about what if I were to do an episode on the essay written in response to this cancellation. And I got some good feedback there of, like, they would be interested to hear my thoughts on this, but at the same time, not wanting to draw too much attention to what is not super a positive, I guess you could say, situation. And so I was sympathetic to both of those feedbacks. And so I think what I'll do is I will kind of give some teasers here, and then in the private podcast feed, I will go through the essay in question and discuss that. And what, because one of the things, of course, that is tricky and interesting about running a podcast is there is always going to be, every time I jump on and publish content that includes my opinion, there will be the "who does he think he is" kind of responses from some people. And I knew that going into starting a podcast. Anytime you put your opinions, especially related to a profession, and out there for your colleagues, you're going to get some of that. Hey, this guy's opinion is wrong and he's an idiot, and why is he talking about this online? Well, the great thing about that is that this show comes with a subscribe button, or not, right? And so what I do think, though, is interesting about this situation that I'm cryptically discussing, is that there is some important stuff there for us to talk about. There are a lot of misunderstandings. One of my favorite things to study, actually, is this concept of how we interact with each other around issues of social justice, race, gender, all those types of things. I read a lot about it. And so in this, the essay that I will be discussing, I've got an attempt, I think, at a charitable reading of the essay, where I try to point out what I think are some valid points, but also point out some really big misunderstandings that are going on with a lot of people related to some of these topics. So if you head over to patreon.com/Choralosophy, you will be able to hear the rest of this episode. For everyone else on the main feed, continue to enjoy all of the free content here and all the great conversations. If you haven't had a chance recently to tune in, we've had some really awesome episodes of late with Dr. Ferdinand, as I mentioned. Dr. Betsy Cook Weber are the most two recent episodes that were just got some great feedback from those conversations, because, of course, there are two luminaries in the field, and we've got some luminaries coming up as well, which I can't tell you about, because that's another thing we do over on Patreon, is I reveal the guests before they come on, which is really cool. And the people over there know who's coming on ahead of time. And if they want to, they can drop questions in over there, and I can work them into the conversation. So head on over there if you're interested in that. So now that we're on the Patreon only version of this conversation, of course, most of you probably already figured out.